to our second and final video as we prepare for our sermon series called Simply Jesus on the Gospel of Mark starting this Sunday. In the last video, we looked at the questions what and who in relation to Mark's Gospel. What is a Gospel and who is Mark? If you didn't have a chance to watch that video, I would encourage you to go and watch that before watching this one. I want to focus today on two other questions concerning Mark's Gospel. These are when and why. When was this Gospel written and why was it written? These two questions are very closely related, as you'll see. Of the four Gospels that we find in the Bible, most Bible scholars believe Mark was written the earliest. John was written the latest, with Matthew and Luke falling somewhere in between. And the date most often suggested for the writing of Mark's Gospel is 65 AD, about 30 years after the death, burial, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus. Some would argue that Mark was written earlier, sometime in the 50s AD, and others would argue for a later date, sometime in the early 70s. But around 65 AD is where most scholars seem to land. We believe, as was said in the last video, that Mark is writing from Rome and that he's recording in this gospel the preaching and teaching of Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples. And there are two likely reasons why around 65 AD Mark commits pen to parchment and writes this gospel. First of all, many of the eyewitnesses of Jesus' life, death, burial, resurrection, and ascension are starting to die off. If all you needed to do to hear about Jesus was to track down one of the 12 disciples and hear it straight from them, or one of the 72 that Jesus sent out on mission, or one of the women that went with Jesus, or find one of the 500 eyewitnesses that to Jesus' resurrection that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 15, or wait for a visit from Paul or one of his companions and hear it right from them. Why bother writing an account of Jesus' life when there were so many eyewitnesses around you that you could talk to? I mean, for Mark, he had Peter right there. Anything he wanted to know about Jesus, he could just ask. But Peter was martyred for his faith in Jesus in Rome in 64 AD. Other of Jesus' disciples have also died or been killed also. And this increases the urgency to record what they observed and experienced in their time with Jesus. Think about veterans from World War II. Not too many years ago, many of us had a close relative that served in that war that we could talk to and hear their eyewitness stories. But within the last 20 years, many of these veterans have been passing on, and so there's been an increased urgency to record their stories for future generations. But something else is likely going on as well in Mark's world. In 64 AD, a fire rips through Rome, destroying a large part of the city. And in popular opinion, Nero, the current emperor, is blamed. No matter how hard he tries to shake the accusations, he can't. And so, he finds a scapegoat: Christians. Roman historian Tacitus, in his Annals, writes about Nero's attempts to blame Christians for the fire. This is what he says: "Therefore, to scorch the rumor, Nero substituted as culprits and punished with the utmost exquisite cruelty a class loathed for their abominations, whom the crowd styled Christians. Christus, from whom the name is derived, had undergone the death penalty in the reign of Tiberius by sentence of the procurator Pontius Pilate." Checked for the moment, this pernicious superstition again broke out, not only in Judea, the home of the disease, but in the capital itself, that receptacle for everything hideous and degraded from every quarter of the globe, which there finds a vogue. Accordingly, arrest was first made of those who confessed to being Christians. Next, on their disclosures, vast numbers were convicted, not so much on the charge of arson as for the hatred of the human race. Every sort of derision was added to their deaths. They were wrapped in the skins of wild beasts and dismembered by dogs. Others were nailed to crosses. Others, when the daylight failed, were set afire to serve as lamps by night. This was a particularly difficult time to be a Christian, and especially to be one in Rome. It was under Nero's persecution of Christians that Peter was killed. Christianity was outlawed, and it seemed in an attempt to both preserve Peter's teaching about Jesus in this dark time, but also to encourage followers of Jesus in their faith by pointing to the example of Jesus' own perseverance through suffering. Mark pens his gospel. So now, folks, you are prepared to begin this new sermon series with some key background information that will help you as you walk through Mark's gospel together with our church. I hope you'll join us this Sunday in person or online as we begin Simply Jesus, a journey through the Gospel of Mark. God bless.